An international conference focusing on Ukraine's immediate and long-term rebuilding needs opens today in London. Even though the war is ongoing, officials say that some needs cannot wait. A detailed report from the World Bank in March found that nearly 2 million homes had been damaged or destroyed. Satellite images from some eastern cities show entire housing complexes have been razed to the ground. More than 1 in 5 public health institutions and hospitals have been damaged or destroyed. The World Bank estimated reconstructing the energy sector alone will cost $47 billion. Schools, roads, bridges, rail lines, and stations all need rebuilding. Huge areas of farmland and farm equipment have been decimated. The estimated overall cost of rebuilding is at least $411 billion over the next 10 years. Now, it's a huge task, and the final cost is, of course, not yet known, not least because the country is still at war and Russian forces continue to bomb towns and cities. Correspondent Sonia Falnikar is outside Kyiv to get a picture of rebuilding efforts.
Out with the old and in with the new. More than a year ago, fierce fighting erupted here near Kyiv, leaving Natalia Doroshenko's home damaged.
You see, we don't have a ceiling. It was blown up. It was leaking everywhere.
Natalia can't afford to repair her home. She says she hasn't received any government help and relies entirely on volunteers who are filling the gap. This group focuses on rebuilding destroyed houses like Natalia's across Ukraine, despite the huge scale of the task.
In the Donbass and in the Zaporizhia region, there are entire towns and villages that have been razed to the ground. Our work in Kyiv is just a drop in the ocean. But we need to do this. People need to live, to hide. It's also a form of psychological support.
Natalia is lucky. Her neighbors' homes on either side didn't survive. Most houses here in the village of Moshun are still scarred. Just a few kilometers away, the town of Irpin, the scene of some of the most infamous clashes in the early weeks of the conflict. Here, the top floors are gone. The building is on a demolition list. But the remaining residents refuse to leave. Andriy Balan takes us to show the damage caused by a direct artillery strike.
Come in, there's one flat here, the other there.
Fire has swallowed everything. Fortunately, no one died.
What remains of the bed? A chandelier.
3 insists the gutted apartments can be rebuilt.
Why should this building be pulled down? It's almost 70% occupied. Most people have come back. We have furniture and flats not impacted. All the utilities are working. All of us will have to be moved somewhere. Nobody knows where. We're all of different ages.
It's a challenge local authorities are familiar with. Irpin's deputy mayor says nearly 70% of the city was damaged last year. He says they're trying to build back, but they need more funds.
To tackle this on our own is impossible. We need to rebuild now. We want to bring back life to our city. We don't want our children, our residents, to see ruins which remind them of the horrors of last year.
But rebuilding in a war zone isn't easy.
Do you see what's happening?
Explosions. Russian missiles, repelled by Ukraine's air defenses.
I will not survive. It's better to die. I can't bear this.
Though Ukraine's efforts to rebuild could be wiped out in an instant by a missile strike, the country is determined not to give up.
And for more on the conference, we are joined now by correspondent Birgit Mass in London and Nick Connolly in Kyiv. And Birgit, I'd like to begin with you. What will be discussed today with regard to Ukraine?
This is a big conference. We're told that around 1,000 participants from at least 61 countries, top politicians, top people from industry, and they want to send a signal of support for Ukraine, also to Russia. So the British government has set the agenda. This is a conference that has already taken part in previous years, but in this year there is a focus on private companies, and the British government wants to make sure that international investment is galvanized here at this conference. As we've seen in this report, there is a short-term need, so there is reconstruction already going on while the war is still raging, but of course, there has to be a focus on the reconstruction that's happening when the war has ended. And this is where international companies, the UK government will hope that they come together and form what they call a business compact, so an intention to invest in Ukraine. And the focus is on how can that be, how can the investment also be in a way secured. There will be a focus on the insurance of these war risks. So a high-profile conference in London to show that the West is standing by Ukraine.
Nick, what does Ukraine expect as an outcome of the conference?
Well, Ukraine has an economy that's basically on life support right now. The government and the tax receipts here in Ukraine are able to cover basically the needs of the army, to pay soldiers' wages and to buy new weapons, but everything else, from roads to teachers to healthcare, that is all coming from Western donors right now. And there had been a lot of frustration that lots of the big promises we'd seen over the last year were then often not delivered on in a timely fashion, leaving kind of Ukraine's government facing a cliff edge every couple of months when the money that had been promised was delayed. So I think there's hope that this is going to be more stable now and that money is going to come according to a kind of pre-agreed strategy. And as Birgit mentioned there, it's about starting to rebuild while the missiles are still flying, while this war continues. I think there's a big fear that if Ukraine waits too long with reconstruction and it's all put off till after some kind of peace deal or at least some kind of ceasefire with Russia, that could see millions of Ukrainians who have left the country deciding that actually their life, their future is better off in Europe and that this is not a country with an economic future. So they're really worried about, even if they do win on the battlefield, the long-term prospects of making this a kind of viable economy and one that not only investors will believe in, but also Ukrainians who've left the country.
And as we wait for them to take to the podium, let's bring in now DW's Birgit Maas, who is standing by with us from London for more on this recovery conference. So tell us a little bit more about what is going to be discussed today with regard to Ukraine, Birgit.
It's a very big conference. We're told 1,000 delegates, at least 61 countries, and high profile, as you already mentioned. Ursula von der Leyen, the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock is also coming, also the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. They are all here in order to galvanize support for Ukraine. The focus this year is on private companies. The UK government is setting the agenda, and they are launching what they call a Ukraine Business Compact. So they want to encourage companies, international companies, to help Ukraine and to set out their intentions to support Ukraine. Short term, the reconstruction is going on as the war is still raging, but also long term, what's going to happen once the war has ended. And it's very important for these international companies that their investments are in some way protected. So they need to be, in a way, coaxed to pledge their support for Ukraine. And one of these levers will be insurance. So this is also what's going to be discussed, what we're expecting to be discussed at this conference. How are these investments insured, and what is the role also of international institutions like the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development? All these agents, they're all here at the conference, so really high profile, in order to signal the support of the West for Ukraine. Also a signal to Russia that the West is standing by Ukraine. And in the words of the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow.
How do the participating countries, Birgit, want to win over private businesses to invest into rebuilding Ukraine?
This is where the UK's initiative of this war risk insurance comes in. So this will be quite technical discussions in what way international institutions and also individual governments can actually guarantee these investments. So private companies obviously investing in war-torn countries, that is a very big risk. And how can this be basically buffered by international institutions and also by individual companies? That's going to be very high on the agenda. The focus really is on private business. The UK government has said that over 400 companies will pledge their support for Ukraine here in London. Those are international technology companies like Virgin, banks like Citi and Rothschild, and other companies. There are many sectors in Ukraine that need the support, and they are actually also lucrative for businesses. There is the residential sector, there is the agrarian sector, but also the industrial sector, and all these can actually be attractive for companies to invest in. This is what economists have told Deutsche Welle. But they also basically need some sort of insurance. They won't just go in and take the risk all by themselves. And how can international institutions and how can those companies that are here at the conference, how can they support businesses?
Talk with us a little bit more about how exactly that is looking, Birgit. I mean, because it is so challenging. One must not forget that Ukraine is indeed still at war.
Ukraine is indeed still at war, and this is what's so difficult. So on one hand, there is this short-term support while the war is still going on. This is something like helping with the infrastructure, helping with roads and bridges. But then there is the Building Back Better strategy. This is what Ukraine is hoping for. They are hoping for a green recovery. This is what their own interest is, and this is where they're hoping to gather some momentum here at the conference. So not just build up the old infrastructure, but to build up a more sustainable infrastructure for the future. And this is where all these international companies that are here in London, where they come in.